Welcome everyone to today's panel. We are thrilled to have you here. My name is Kate Kuzminski, and I am the Senior Fellow and the Director of the Military Veterans and Society Program at the Center for New American Security. CNAS is committed to bold, innovative, bipartisan research that drives the national security policy forward. The Military Veterans and Society Program focuses our research on military personnel, veterans, and military families, and the civil-military divide. Our program explores how the military services can access, recruit, and retain the talent necessary to fight and win the nation's wars. As part of our research, we examine the effects of policies, practices, and elements of service culture that enable or constrain the service's access to talent. We further explore how the services and DoD may draw from a talent pool that reflects the society from which it is drawn, particularly as there is a limited pool of qualified candidates for military service. A key part of our mission is to elevate underrepresented voices and perspectives of service members and veterans in order to provide perspective and a human element to our research. As part of our work, we're hosting today's panel discussion to commemorate Hispanic Heritage Month. This event is the third in a year-long series of veteran author panels under the umbrella of our Elevating Diverse Voices initiative. We have an excellent lineup of veteran authors for this panel. Feel free to use the chat and Q&A functions within the webinar to submit your questions throughout the panel discussion. This event is being recorded and the audio will be released as a CNAS podcast and on the CNAS website in the coming weeks. A reminder that the opinions expressed during this panel are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent their employers or CNAS. There are approximately 329,000 service members who identify as Hispanic, Latino, or Latinx serving on active duty. Hispanic veterans make up 7% of the total veteran population of the United States, totaling about 1.3 million people. Hispanic Americans have a long history of service in the United States military. Today, we are fortunate enough to be joined by three of those veterans who are authors within the community: Ruthy Muñoz, Maritza Rivera, and Max Uriarte, perhaps better known to our audience as Terminal Lance. We are honored that Congressman Ruben Gallego is giving the keynote remarks to kick off this panel discussion. Representative Gallego has represented Arizona's 7th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives since 2015. He currently serves on the House Armed Services Committee. He's a veteran of the United States Marine Corps and served in Iraq. So please welcome Congressman Gallego for his remarks.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you to these great authors. It's great to be on a panel, especially with an author that I've read for many years in Terminal Lance, as someone that almost was a Terminal Lance. It's ironic in some ways to be on the same panel, and I look forward to reading Ruthy and Maritza's books. And it's actually great to actually be talking about this topic because I think for many generations, war and the Latino identity were not ever two things that were combined, at least not when it came to the perspective of the United States. Though we have a rich history going back all the way to the American Civil War, American Revolution, and down to today. As an author, and hopefully a successful author, I will tell you one of the most important things is when I was writing was communicating my culture through my book. And I think it's really important that we recognize that, because many times, even right now, in the depictions of OEF and OIF, Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom Afghanistan, in popular media, you largely see it from a just Anglo perspective, even though for those that are currently serving, you will know that we have one of the most diverse service force that we've ever had. And especially in the combat arms, you will see that it is actually even more diverse and even more Latino heavy. But you don't actually see that you don't see that really in a perspective from when it comes to even journalism. You had 13 members of the military that just died in Afghanistan. Of those, I think I could identify just by last names, 5 of them that were Latino. But the perspective, there was no deep perspective of why there were so many young Latinos in a situation like that or in war, and how are they more likely to find themselves in especially in combat arms. I'll tell you my personal story is I joined the Marines because that's what Latinos are supposed to do. You're supposed to join the Marine Corps. If you're going to join the service, you join the Marines. It's something that has been I think that goes back to probably World War II. You know, the recruiters walk around our schools, walk around our neighborhoods. You know, all the men that you knew were in the Marines, and now including women. And when I had my opportunity, I decided to join the Marine Corps and decided to do infantry. I was a reservist, which ended up not being a reservist, as often to my activation. But you know, that story is very rarely told, and certainly again is not being told right now from our perspective, or from the perspective really of families. I think we're going to have Maritza, maybe Ruthy, also talking about the families that actually go to war with these Latinos. And sometimes you're going to wars in mixed statuses. And I know a lot of Latino families that sent their kids to war while also hiding from, hiding from Border Patrol or from ICE. I know some people that actually, unfortunately, sent their kids overseas to die, and then they themselves were later deported. These are, you know, and so those stories exist. And there's the stories of our Latino servicewomen that are consistently under pressure to be both patriotic Americans, but also have to defend themselves from, you know, extremely toxic work environment, you know, to include, you know, sexual harassment, sexual assault, or just in general sexism. And that story is also really being ignored and not told. And we saw some of the repercussions of that with Vanessa Guillen from 2 years ago. So this is a great opportunity to really talk about our contribution. And I'll give you a short story about like how, you know, my Latino culture, you know, crisscrossed with, you know, war. One of the things that, two of them actually pretty funny. One of them is that we found ourselves, my unit had a lot of Latinos that spoke Spanish. We found ourselves speaking Spanish to each other once in a while because we suspected that the Iraqis we were around or we had arrested spoke English, and we felt more comfortable and more secure speaking in that language than in English. And you know, it was a very additive thing to do that you know, most people who, you know, are always talking about English only, you know, don't realize that there is something and some value to it. The second funny thing is one day I went on what's called an HVT mission, a high value target mission, where somebody's on your list, you're supposed to go get them from their house, right? So that's exactly what we did. Nothing dramatic about that whatsoever. We knocked on the house, put the picture up to the man's face. He looked like that person that they gave us. He came with us willingly. You know, we zip tied him, we threw him in the back. And he looked at all of us Marines that were in there, and he asked if we were part of the Mexican army. And I was really confused because, you know, in Marines, we don't wear American flags on our lapels like the Army does. And we don't have our name tags. That's all covered up anyway. And so I realized why he said that, because it was Gallego, it was Mierda, and there was Gonzalez, and there was another Lance Corporal, so like Chavez, probably all next to me. And, you know, in this man's perspective, because they don't have a perspective of the military and understanding that, you know, we're that diverse. He like, the only way you could have that many Latino last names is if the Mexican Army is now participating as part of the Iraq War. To be clear, the Mexican Army was not at all with us in the Iraq or Afghanistan war. I'm sure they were supporting in different ways, but certainly did not provide any troops. Right? But that is something that people just miss, right? We have been a rich fabric of our military culture for generations, and now especially we exist, and it's really important that we see that. So I greatly appreciate everyone that's interested in this. I really hope you will buy and support these Latino authors, and please go out there and look for more. And I hope to see you on the future, and I can't wait to read all your books.
Thank you so much, Congressman. We appreciate you contributing to the conversation today. So now I'm pleased to introduce the three panelists that we have for this discussion. Ruthy Muñoz is an Army veteran, a linguist, and a freelance journalist. Her writing has been published in The War Horse and Reuters. She is a freelance contributor to the global travel publication Skift and focuses on airlines coverage in her day job. She also freelances with the publication Palabra of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. Maritza Rivera is a Puerto Rican poet and Army veteran. She has been writing poetry for over 50 years and is the creator of a short form of poetry called Blackjack. She is also the publisher of Casa Mariposa Press. She is the author of About You, A Mother's War, written during her son's 2 tours in Iraq, Baker's Dozen, 21, Blackjack Poems, and Blackjack Poetry Playing Cards. Her work appears in literary magazines, anthologies, online publications, and in public arts projects. In fact, her poetry is featured in a sculpture and has quite a few outlets for her work. She leads an annual poetry retreat, now in its 8th year, to be hosted in Puerto Rico. And lastly, we have Max Uriarte, who is a Marine Corps veteran, author, and filmmaker. Some of you may better know him as the person behind Terminal Lance, which has become the most popular comic strip in the US military and has quite a cult following. He is the author of the New York Times bestselling graphic novels, The White Donkey and Battleborn. So with that, I'll start our moderated questions for our panelists. A reminder that you're welcome to contribute questions as the conversation goes on. So Ruthy, I'm going to start with you. As a veteran of the US Army, how would you describe your overall experience as a woman of color in the armed forces?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I think that's such an interesting question to have. I served during the first Gulf War. I'm not a combat veteran, I have to put that out there, but I did serve during that time. And being a woman of color wasn't really an issue then. I think the bigger issue was being a woman. And so how was it for me? It depends. I would say, when I went through jump school in Fort Benning, my sergeant airborne, he rode me harder than he rode, the other guys. That could be though, in his defense, I will say that could be though, because I was afraid of heights, which is why I became airborne. And, when I had to jump out of the tower, I kind of froze and they kicked me out of the tower and I screamed the whole way down. So it could be because of that, or it could be because I'm a woman. I don't know, but I know that he rode me really hard. And so what that did for me was that I felt that I had to prove myself, not only in jump school, but throughout my military service, that I was as strong as one of the dudes, made sure that I got my blood wings, didn't flinch, because I was as strong as one of the dudes and I belonged there. And that's it until I encountered sexual harassment and then domestic violence in the military. And we'll probably talk about that a little bit more, but I will say I went into the military a strong woman and I left broken and had to repair myself over the last 25 plus years to become a strong woman again.
We appreciate you and value you sharing your perspective and experience there. Maritza, you have written both about your own military experience, but also about the experience of what it's been like to be the mother of someone who's deployed. Can you speak a little bit about your experience in both of those positions and perhaps, which you found more challenging?
Oh boy, that's a tough question to answer. It's also a tough role to be in. I'll start with being a mom. Understanding the commitment, understanding the desire to serve. That's on one side of the equation. But then raising two children who, as a single mom, I had said to them, okay, I will support you through high school, then you have to work or go to school, and if you can't decide, you can join the military. And the last thing I expected both of them to do was follow in mom's footsteps. My daughter graduated in 2001 and joined the Army. My son graduated in 2003 and joined the Marines. both of them had their struggles. My daughter, one of her assignments, her unit was activated, her reserve unit was activated, and she was stationed at Walter Reed. She came home in tears every single day because of the things that she was handling in finance. She was in finance, but was dealing with young soldiers coming back with their families, trying to support them. And she literally said to me, Mom, if I get orders to Iraq, you'll have to come visit me in jail. And I said, I would be more than happy to do that. Then my son is activated and sent to Iraq, not once, but twice, and twice to Afghanistan. His first tour, I was scared to death. His second tour, I was angry. And to be able to deal with all of those emotions, that's where A Mother's War came from. And it's posted on milspeak.org, which is a military writer's website. And they posted it, I think it was Mother's Day of two, I'm trying to remember, of on a Mother's Day. And it was, so I take it from the point of view of a mom, and going from the deployment to the, holidays, to watching or not watching the news, to those driveway moments that I refer to, and it ends with a last letter. So it's only 12 poems, but one for each month of the year. And it took me a long time to be able to read from that manuscript in public. And people, after the Semper Fi, which is the last letter poem, you could hear a pin drop when I read it. And then people would give me their condolences. And it specifically says, our children, our sons. It's not just about me. And so that took on a much more intense point in my life where I had to write about it because my sanity was not in a good place, versus my personal experience, which was, again, I was in the first class of commissioned officers before ROTC officers came in to active duty, and my kids love to tease me that I was in the last class of the Women's Army Corps. So I bridged those two eras. So I won't tell you how old I am. But it was very, very different. It was different then, and my experiences as an XO, an S2, military instructor, all of those were all positive, for the most part, positive experiences for me, versus dealing as a mom with my kids.
Yeah, certainly two very different perspectives, and thank you for sharing that with us. Moving on to Max, you have a sincere and devoted following both on social media and through your published works. What do you think your writing of graphic novels communicates or reaches that traditional prose or even poetry might not? And when and why did you decide to write in the form of graphic novels?
Well, so I think that given that my audience is mostly Marines and military, the graphic novel is a great format because they can't read. So the pictures are really important for them to be able to understand the story. No, I think that what I like about graphic novels and comics is really that element of visual storytelling where you can show what you mean. You can show what the story is rather than just telling it. And I think that, you know, there's something about being able to see something in front of you and being able to you know when, like, what somebody's face looks like when they're talking about somebody, really when they're talking about something, really get a feel for the emotion of the characters, et cetera. And yeah, I guess I started doing comics and graphic novels just because I've kind of always done comics and art, and I knew that I wanted to do a comic strip, and that's kind of how I got into doing Terminal Lance. Was like there was no real military Marine Corps comics like really out there that weren't like either super old or you know, something that was not for my generation. And I knew that I could do it, so I figured I'd give it a shot. And I started just drawing comic strips and putting them up. And Terminal Lance really started like really small, and I built up a kind of organic groundswell of fresh organic Lance Corporals. And yeah, like the early days of Terminal Lance, I was running around putting business cards in the card readers in the barracks and stuff, and putting up posters in the gym and everything, getting people to go to terminallance.com. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really like being able to like show humor, and I think that you know, doing a comedy strip, doing a comedy you know, military humor, it lets you kind of disguise your points and your you know, your commentary behind humor. And if you can make people laugh, you can bring them along with you. And like, people are usually much more willing to go through the door if they have a good laugh on the way in, you know what I mean? So if I have like a larger point that I'm trying to hit in terms of like social commentary or whatever, as long as it's funny, like people will be pretty open to it, I've found.
That's great. Ruthy, you foreshadowed this a little bit, but you wrote a really thoughtful piece about Vanessa Guillen, and you've also spoken a bit about your own experience as a military service member who suffered from sexual harassment and from domestic violence at the hands of another service member in the 1990s, and about the ways in which your chain of command handled the situation, handled you, handled the other service member. Can you talk a bit about your experience, what you're comfortable sharing, particularly as how the chain of command handled issues? And do you see any progress when you look at the way that the military is handling issues now?
Okay. So there's two separate things. So while I was serving in the 82nd Airborne, I was sent on temporary assignment to another unit. And while I was there, it was just the sergeant and I. There was no one else. And it, you know, it started by like brushing his hand on the back of the chair where I would be, or you know, just getting close, and it just really made me uncomfortable. And at first, you know, I started second guessing myself. You know, am I reading more into this than I am, than what's really happening? And so as the days went on, and it became clearer to me that I was not reading into it, I remember being extremely uncomfortable, and asking for, you know, it to stop, and it not stopping. And so I filed a report with the EOC, and then asked to be removed from that situation. And so I thought, man, I dodged the bullet, you know, go back to my unit. My unit was still in the process of returning from Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I was working warehouse supply, and I remember that we we were working out of the warehouse, but we were also working out of the 5-ton rigs where we still had a lot of our supplies in there. And so when I showed up to work, I was told that my sergeant was waiting for me inside of one of the rigs. So when I'm thinking I'm just, going in there and he's gonna give me an assignment or whatever. And that was not the case. And what ended up happening that day was that I was surrounded by several of my NCOs, including the NCO that I had accused of harassing me at that other unit. And I was basically cornered in this, tin can rig, what have you, until I, backtracked my story. And then, it was over and done with. So that's one incident that was demoralizing. And then I married a service member who was abusive, who tried to kill me a few times in the service while we were stationed overseas, while we were stationed in Fort Knox. And I remember vividly, like one time, someone witnessed it, and I was crying for help, and no one would come. He ended up being medically retired, so he went from being a service member to the family member, and that kind of complicated things because what I learned was that you're responsible for your family member actions, and you can face UCMJ, Article 15 or what have you. And so it's not conducive for you to report things. But at some point it became so abusive, like I ended up having to have like surgery in my lip and things like that. And I remember being at the hospital one time, and while I'm getting treatment, he took away the car, and I'm in Fort Knox working at range control, having to walk 10 miles to work at range control. But my command didn't really handle it well, I don't think at first. And then until I was stalked and they saw the stalking, and then he was banned from the installation, but he was still stalking me. He was still finding a way around it while I lived on post. And because he came from a storied military family with high rank, I faced a daily retaliation. And they used my chain of command and the post chain of command to harass me, the service member. And when it really came down to it, they took the male service member who was now a civilian side, and they didn't really have the female service members back. And so I think it was an actual and complete failure, both instances, on the part of the chain of command. I think it was abuse of power on the part of the post chain of command, which had no business stepping into that, and overstepping and lying, which I didn't find out until I got out. And the people that were there for me were fellow soldiers and a first sergeant that I met at church. And they were the people that helped me go into hiding while I was still in the service, to keep me safe. And I'm sorry.
Okay, we are really grateful that you did find community among your fellow soldiers in that moment.
But what I will say that, I was reading this report, and what wasn't there when I was going through this in the 90s was that there wasn't a way for me to get an order of protection because I lived in a service, in a federal installation. Federal installation did not do that. And the city would not give me one because I lived in a federal installation. So it was like a catch-22. You're on your own, figure it out. But now they have this military protective order. So that's good. But it's still a problem. Domestic violence is still a problem that's not really spoken about. Sexual harassment is still a problem. Sexual assault is still a problem, which is another thing, there's hundreds of thousands of people, according to this report, that are still as early as 2018 going through this. And there has to be more. It's great that they did this 90-day report, but there has to be more that's done, and they have to really reach out more to the veteran community that I think has a little bit more freedom to talk about it now, but that is still going through it. And the scars, you can't tell that I had surgery in my lip, so that's gone, but the emotional scars remain. So
certainly. And the report that you're referring to, the Independent Review Commission that DoD undertook over the last from January until July, did start to brush on the issues of domestic violence. And certainly there was the Fort Hood report last December that came out right before the holidays that looked at kind of systemic cultural issues that led to Vanessa Guillen's death. Certainly raised a lot of the systemic issues and the lack of institutional resources that were available, and some of the cultural attitudes as well that fed into it. It was interesting. Over the summer, we had a panel talking about the future of recruitment and how we can recruit a force that really looks like the United States that it represents. And we had the LA recruiting battalion commander speak, and he said that the impact of Vanessa Guillen's experience with sexual assault and harassment and ultimately her murder had a real chilling effect on the entire Latino population in the LA area, not just women, but women and men together. So I think the issues that you raise are really important to thinking about how these base level and institutional level decisions and cultures can affect our ability to make sure that we have the best fighting force in the world and that it represents who we are as Americans. So thank you for sharing that experience.
Absolutely. And Vanessa Guillen's case was shocking. It was infuriating. As a former service member and as a parent, because who wants to send their child into that type of environment? And especially as Latinos, our part of our culture is to like sweep things under the rug, so it was hard writing that piece. But
I can imagine.
But I'm glad that I was able to give her a voice.
And yeah, it's a very moving piece, and we'll put the link to your piece in the chat as well, so that audience members can check that out and read it themselves. Shifting to Maritza, so a similar question to what I asked Max previously about the medium he uses. As the poet on our panel, what do you think poetry offers as a medium to express your experience in a way that prose maybe doesn't?
Before I address that, I did want to make a comment based on what Ruthy just shared, that I'm a Vietnam era veteran. That's the 70s. You're in the 90s. And it was just never reported before. I have two very memorable experiences, and I was an officer. So you would think that fewer things would impact, but no. I remember in training, I was in the class, the first class of women training with men. And I remember someone coming into, we were all in a BOQ, and I remember somebody coming into my my apartment in the middle of the night. And luckily, he was dissuaded, but I never reported it. And a couple of other situations that I had, I just didn't have the knowledge, maybe, or the experience, or it, and it not being talked about. That's nothing I was prepared to deal with. Now, back to your question, Kate. Could you repeat it? Because I was really moved
Absolutely.
by
And
Ruthy's.
yes, and I'm glad that you engaged with that as well. So the question for you as the poet on the panel is what does the medium of poetry offer in sharing your experience that perhaps a prose doesn't? What is it that about the craft of poetry that's really appealing to you?
The craft of poetry, I mean, you have to weigh every single word. Every single word has to have a purpose in a poem. And the experience that I had while I was volunteering at Walter Reed with the Warrior Poets Project was that I was working with soldiers with PTSD, traumatic brain injuries. And the fact that I had just recovered from a concussion and, had gone through aphasia and couldn't carry on a conversation without losing my words. That's one of the reasons they asked me to volunteer for this program. And Dr. Fred Foote, who headed the program, said that I was probably the only one that could relate to what they were going through. And so the power of poetry unlocks doors and unlocks so many doors to reaching soldiers whose voice wasn't being heard, or whose voice wasn't working because the connection between the voice and the brain was, and I could relate to that, and the frustration and all of those things. And I had already been working with blackjack, which is blackjack is a form of 3 7-syllable lines. So the total is 21, hence it's called blackjack. But when you're struggling to access words, the shorter the better. So it was really remarkable. I mean, I was so moved with seeing people being able to access words again with poetry, and finding poetry that could relate in some way to where they were was tremendously powerful. And it was a gift to me. So with Fred Foote and Richard Epstein and the Memorial Day Writers Project, which meets at the National Mall every Memorial Day and Veterans Day for close to 25 years. Those were outlets for younger veterans and older veterans to just share experiences through writing.
That's wonderful. It's a great medium for expressing deeper truths, I think. Mm-hmm. Moving to Max, part of the character development in Terminal Lance includes a Marine that joined because he was looking for something. How often do you think that is a reason that you see for individuals enlisting in the Marine Corps, looking for deeper meaning in life?
I feel like that's kind of why a lot of people enlist, I mean, obviously I can only speak for myself, but when I tell people that I joined the Marine Corps to become a better artist. And they always give me this weird look, like, what does that mean? But myself as a young artist, when I was like, 19 years old, I knew I wanted to tell stories, and I knew I wanted to do art. And I felt like I needed to do something that would give my work a depth and an experience that would give me a little bit more to work with, and something that I guess I wanted people to take me seriously. I don't know. So I enlisted. I was like, you know what, the war in Iraq is going on right now. Why don't I happen to be the right gender, the right age, and I'm fit enough to go do it. So, hey, I want to get to Iraq as quick as I can. So I joined the Marine Corps Infantry, and I remember when I went and did I went and talked to the recruiter, and I did the ASVAB stuff. I scored like a 92, I think, on it. And I came back because I went to MEPS and I'd done it. And then I came back to the recruiter's office. And he was like, "Hey, great job on the ASVAB. You can do anything you want. What do you want to do?" And I was like, "I want to go infantry." And he was like, "Are you sure?" "You don't have to." And I was like, "Yeah, but that's like, to me, that's what I wanted to do. I didn't like." Everybody enlists for their own reasons, right? Everybody joins the military for their own reasons. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I want to have, a great career that I can, I'll be a aircraft mechanic or something. And then when I get out, I can go be an aircraft mechanic in the civilian workforce." But to me, what I was really seeking was, and I find this a lot in the infantry, especially, was more of like a soul enriching experience, something that would ground me as a person to be able to draw from for the rest of my life. And I feel like that's kind of what I got out of the infantry, among other things, and a bad back. Yeah, I think that there is, I think that's why the White Donkey resonated so well with people too, was this kind of this hero's quest of like wanting to find something that you can't even like put into words. It's just something, you don't know what you're looking for. And then people always ask me if I found what I was looking for, and I don't know. I don't know. Abe did find what he was looking for by the end of that book, tragically, but for myself personally, I'm not really sure, to be honest.
Perhaps you found something you weren't looking for.
Yeah, that too.
Moving back to Ruthy, so you mentioned the Independent Review Commission report, and that you had spent some time in that, and that it certainly aligns quite a bit with the moving piece that you had in the War Horse, thinking about the impact of dealing with sexual assault in the military. So after reading through the report, are there any lines of hope that you see, or change that's in a positive direction after looking through the report and after processing your own thoughts and feelings about Vanessa's situation?
That report was extremely triggering, but I'm glad that I got through it. And yes, there are. So it gives me a lot of hope. First of all, that it has even come to fruition. Just the fact that they did this investigation, and they were able to put the report together in 90 days. Is it perfect? No, but did they get it done? Yes. And so at least that opens the door for more discussion, opens the door for Congress to maybe make some changes, hear from more diverse voices, and lead to legislations and changes that can be beneficial to our brothers and sisters that are still serving in active duty. I was really impressed that domestic violence was included in that report. Obviously, I'm biased, but because I've really felt that it's something that isn't really spoken about, but it's something that is very prevalent in the military culture, for both service members and family members. And the fact that they linked it to sexual harassment and sexual assault, and that they talked about in particular being sexually assaulted by your spouse or by your partner, which is something that I also experienced, but was laughed at because they were like, well, how could you be raped if you're married? And so now they're actually paying attention to that. So the Secretary of Defense seems to be gung-ho about moving this forward. And I look forward to the day that that it can be erased. And it's really encouraging. I will say this, it's really encouraging that they're going out to experts and not just assigning Joe Schmo, private or specialist or lance corporal, whatever, to handle things that are like way over their head and that they are not equipped for. So, I mean, more needs to be done, but it's a start.
Yeah, it was encouraging to see how involved the Secretary of Defense and the Deputy Secretary of Defense have been in the formation of the report, and that it wasn't, as you say, kind of delegated to someone as an extra duty, but instead was a serious attempt at framing what the problem is, so that they can move in the direction of solutions. It was also interesting to see that not only were they dealing with legal and justice issues and prevention issues and victim advocacy, but also that they're looking at how do you go about changing climate and culture to eradicate the presence of sexual harassment and assault in the military.
Absolutely.
Ruthy, yeah.
No, and I thought it was really interesting that they said, and it was something that I could really relate to, that a lot of people that have gone through that really wanted to have a career in the military. And, that experience just totally changed the trajectory of their life.
That's right.
And the trauma remains for, it could be a lifetime of trauma. And for me, that really spoke to me, because that's something that I've always struggled with, because like, why am I not fixed all these years later? And why does the, why am I still a mess? And so my friend this morning, she told me, you're still a work in progress. And so that's the way to look at it. And it's just encouraging to know that you're not alone. So
that's right. Max, you wanted to hop in?
Oh yeah, I just Ruthy, your story is like it's so tragic, and it's so exemplary of so many women in the armed forces, like throughout time. And I think that the things that we're seeing today, things are trying to change in the right direction, but there's still so much work to do. And just as like a dude myself, who obviously did not have these kinds of problems when I was enlisted, like I didn't know that these were so prevalent, like that this stuff was so prevalent, especially in the Marine Corps infantry. Like I didn't even see women when I was in the Marine Corps, like there were no women. This is prior to women being allowed in the infantry, which was only in the last few years. And so, for people like me who had no idea, like this has been like really, shocking to learn like how prevalent sexual assault and all these things are in the military for women. And I know that, culture itself has shifted quite a bit in the positive direction. I think the Me Too movement was like a big part of that. And, finally being able to empower women to, speak up and support them when they need it is so important. And it's something that is like, it's so slow, but I do feel like, I hope at least, that it is changing in a positive direction. And we're seeing that with, women coming to the infantry, in the combat MOSs. And I think that the only real solution is more women in the armed forces. I mean, you look at the Marine Corps, my perspective is pretty much all Marine Corps, but you look at the Marine Corps and it's like, you know, you have a population of 7% women total in the Marine Corps versus 93% men. And you can see why this is such a toxic problem, you know. And so I've talked about it a little bit before, and like, you know, on my outlets and whatever. But personally, like, I really believe that, you know, the imperative to change the culture is not on women. And I think that's a problem that a lot of men in the military don't fully understand. It's like, it's on men to change this. It's on men to change this culture for everybody, because they are the absolute majority of the military, and it's not on anybody else but them to change it. Sorry, that's all I just wanted to add to that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think it also highlights, Ruthy, the power of your words and sharing your story. And we really do honor and respect that. Maritza, thinking about how you've engaged with, as you mentioned, teaching writing workshops at Walter Reed for injured service members. What has that experience been like? And what are some of the biggest pieces of guidance that you've shared with service members who are learning to share their experience?
Before I answer that question, I had my hand up to comment on what Max was saying. And
I apologize for missing that.
That's okay. Max, doesn't this inspire you to maybe write a graphic novel after, you know, if you do some research about, I mean, this problem has been existing from the beginning of time, that women have been in the military. Doesn't that inspire you to write a graphic novel about a woman's experience?
You know, I think that, like, I have, like, so my last graphic novel, Battleborn, prominently has a woman character. She's really like the lead supporting character of the book. And you know, personally, I feel like that story is not my story to tell. Yeah, and so I feel like, you know, me telling that story would kind of detract from it in some way. Like, I think that I would do everything I can to empower a woman who wants to tell that story, but I just feel like it's not mine to tell. Like, I feel like I don't have the breadth of understanding as a man to be able to do that.
Oh no, I understand, but again, the focus is always on what women need to do, and maybe not from a woman's perspective. Maybe, I don't know. I think there's a lot more there that can be worked on. And just a thought. But I'm sure there are plenty of people who would be willing to lend their talents to something like that. But it's a man's problem. That women are unfortunately being, a lot of times, feel responsible for something they did or didn't do, when the focus needs to be shifted from what someone did to a woman to what did some man do. So, right. and I've worked with domestic violence. I was a community educator in Arizona a few moons ago, and so I've encountered all kinds of women in recovery that the basis for their issues was domestic violence and a whole lot of other issues. So anyway, this is a really long conversation to have, and but we should stay in touch.
Of course, yeah.
And I see that Ruthy wants to jump in on that as well.
Oh boy.
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, I literally have been trying to write a book on military sexual trauma before it became a thing out in the civilian world, you know, before the unfortunate death of Vanessa Guillen brought it to the forefront. The thing is, you know, a lot of people, and this is a problem with trauma, right? A lot of people do not want to share their story. It's been really difficult to find people that want to share their story, because I don't want to write a book about just me. Obviously, I'd like to write a book about service members who experience it, and I wanted to point out that it's not just women; it happens to men as well.
Sure.
It happens to our service members that are part of the LGBTQ community, and so finding people has been an issue. But if anyone, is interested to share your story with me, reach out. And I would love to work with Max on that, because I think maybe between the two of us, we could come out with something really powerful.
I think,
But I did want to put that out
Yeah.
there that, the problem is not writing the book. The problem is having people come forward because of the stigma
Mhm.
and because of the trauma.
Yeah. But there's a collaboration that's going to result out of this.
Oh, there definitely
Yeah.
is. We'll be in touch.
Yeah, cool. And
Right.
so back to I think, again, I always speak about the power of poetry. One of the things that I always try to do is honor my ancestors with my poetry. And my grandmother is is always in something that I've written or am writing. But again, it's every time that I teach, I've been teaching for a while too, but every time that I teach, it feels like I learn so much more. And I think I said earlier how cathartic writing is, and it's a way to there's therapy that I had been involved with that was called psychodrama, and this is a lot of what happens with the power of writing, is that you take something, whatever it is, and maybe something that is traumatic, and you create something else with it. Maybe you've created something else than that. You've taken that trauma and you've converted it into something else that is creative, that is an outlet, that is therapeutic, that is cathartic. And the one thing that I've learned also is a lot of times you don't know as a writer who's going to be inspired by what you write, or how people will be impacted by what you write. And that's something that, again, that's why I think poetry especially is such a powerful medium. And I see poetry a lot like visual arts, because a lot of the process is the same in terms of being visual, in terms of being able to use words and paint a picture. These are things that I've learned from teaching, and hopefully these are things that people that have been in my workshops have been able to utilize. And that's the most I can hope for, that it's made a positive difference with people that I've shared it with.
Max, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I just think there's something really powerful about that idea of taking trauma and turning it into something beautiful. Like there's something coming out of that can impact people, and creating art out of something that was so horrible. Yeah, I just really, that's the beautiful idea.
Yeah, it's not mine. It's been used in the counseling and therapeutic arenas for some time, but I've experienced how powerful it is to convert something and make it yours, rename it, and create something else with it.
Yeah, and what's so beautiful about that too is you're taking the power away from that trauma, and
Exactly.
you're putting the power into it. You know, it's yours
Exactly.
now, and this is something that you own and create.
Mhm. And then you can create a different ending, which
Exactly.
is
Great.
gives you the freedom to do with it whatever you want. Kate, did that
Great.
answer your question?
Yeah. I'm gonna pass the next question to Max, but Ruthy and Maritza, I want you to think about this as well, because I think it is something that comes through in all of your writing. So Max, you have written more specifically about the experience of service members or veterans feeling disconnected from the broader community that they're a part of when they return to broader society. Have your opinions about that changed over time, and how have you seen the relationship between service members and veterans and broader society evolve?
I don't know if my opinions have changed over time. I think that you know, I think a problem that in my opinion, I think a problem that a lot of veterans have is that they put the they put the weight of obligation on the civilian population, when really it's kind of on them. I find that a lot of veterans close themselves off. A lot of veterans aren't open to engaging with civilians and being open and sharing their experiences with them. And so I think that you know, the military experience is an extraordinary experience in a lot of ways, especially if you went to war. And so you're kind of on like a level of life experience that a lot of civilians are never really going to understand. And so when you come home, it's really on you to come down to their level and be like, hey, this is, you know, what I went through. Do you want to talk about it? And try to engage with the world around them. And I think a lot of veterans just have a lot of trouble doing that, due to trauma, due to a lot of things that are really hard to overcome. And I think that you know, people talk a lot about that military civilian divide, and I don't think it's almost like it's not a real thing, but we make it a real thing, you know. And it's like when we come home, I think a lot of military need to kind of like come down and try their best to reintegrate into society and become you know, part of that functioning culture. And I think a lot of veterans close themselves off. You know, they wear these veteran T-shirts and the veteran hats, and they go, oh, "I'm a veteran," and they, you know, just that whole like identity of it is can be kind of consuming in a toxic way sometimes. And so I talk a lot about that in Terminal Lance and stuff too. Just that angry Facebook veteran that comments on everything and is like angry about everything. And I just think that that's sort of like a kind of toxic way to live. And yeah. I don't know if that answers the question. But yeah, I don't know if like, I've kind of always felt that way. I also, you know, I've been out for a while. And you know, I guess I've seen a lot of it because I've seen a lot of the Marine Corps doing Terminal Lance. I've been, you know, all over the place. I've gotten to meet all these people. I've been to bases. I meet Marines all the time. And I was a Marine, and like, you know, there's something about Marines, active duty Marines are like the nicest people in the world. Like you go talk to them and they're so happy to talk to anybody because their life is so terrible. I was going to use some inappropriate words, but their life is so miserable. You go talk to them on a base and they're just so happy to see anybody. They're just like, oh God, this is amazing, you know? But then when they get out, there's a lot of time I'm not saying this is like a generalization, but sometimes there's like this shift of like going from being this really sweet, nice person to being like, you know, I'm a veteran bro guy and I'm like really angry about stuff and, you know, angry veteran, sure, don't talk to me because I'm a veteran or whatever. And I just find that really gross and weird.
Yeah, there's two elements to the civil divide, right? It's the civilian population and also the veteran population and the military population, and finding ways to interact. Ruthy, do you have any observations about kind of the relationship between broader society and service members or veterans?
Well, I was laughing when he was talking about putting on your military or your veteran t-shirt and your cap. And, you know, I only use those when I go to the VA. And it's because of, it's because I'm sick and tired of, oh, what branch did your husband serve in?
Yeah.
Hello, we served the same uncle, you know. So, you know, just put that out there.
I didn't. Sorry, I was
ahead.
just gonna say I don't normally put like military stickers on my car, you know, but I used to have a Marine Corps sticker on my car, and it did get me out of a ticket one time. I got pulled over and the cop was like, "Oh, you're a Marine," and we were talking about that, and he's all like, "Hey, just you know, slow down next time." And I was like, "Okay."
That's funny.
That's great. Marissa, any observations on your part?
Oh my gosh, I like Ruthy, I've been laughing. I've been trying to not fall off my chair. But again, I'm from the 70s, and it took me about 2 years to be able to have a conversation with someone, because my language was different, my experiences were different, my friends could not relate to anything I'd been doing for the last however many years. And so it took me 2 years to be able to become a civilian again. And like, you know, like Ruthy says, you know, it's like anytime that, you know, I'm one of the few female veterans in my organization. I don't know if there are any others, but it's kind of, it's weird. It's just weird, but it takes time to reintegrate. But again, we're talking about a lot of trauma. We're talking about a lot of experiences that only other veterans can relate to.
Mhm.
So it makes it even harder to discuss things. As I'm a veteran, both of my children are veterans. We have, I don't know how many other uncles and, you know, cousins are veterans, and still there are things that after 4 tours and severe PTSD, my son cannot talk about to any of us,
Mhm.
because it's so traumatic. And so it's funny in some sense, but there's a reason why it happens to, because other people cannot relate. And if they can't even show the slightest bit of respect for veterans, for, you know, there should be no homeless veterans, there should be, you know, again, that I think we have a higher respect for each other than civilians have for us in some situations.
Ruthy and then Max.
So you know, I did want to say that, yes, once you integrate, you know, the divide is not as much. But I you know, I disagree with Max in that I do believe there is a divide for certain aspects of it, and there are a lot of things that civilians just don't get, because they have not served. And I mean, look, I'm not a combat vet, but I remember when I was going to school, I went through the voc rehab program for disabled veterans, right? There were OEF, OIF veterans there. And there was this one guy, he was very triggered by civilians. And I remember that, you know, I would be able to step in as a girl, shorter than him, whatever, you know, when it was about to go down between two guys, heated conversation, veteran, civilian, and I would step in and people were looking at me like, have you lost your mind? And I was like, he's not gonna do anything to me because I'm a veteran. And he would not. It was this respect thing. And he would tell me, it doesn't matter if you're not a combat vet, you get me. But if, you know, a civilian said the same thing, he would flip out. And so, unfortunately, there is that divide. There is part of it is because of trauma, part of it is because of PTSD, part of it is because of, oh, I'm a tough guy, whatever, I'm a tough person. It's not always a guy, it could be a girl as well. Um, but there is. So that part I didn't totally agree with you. But I did want to say, I choose to go to counseling outside therapy for my trauma. Don't really trust the VA for it. That's a whole nother conversation. But I had a civilian counselor that she gave up on me because it was just too overwhelming, like the military aspect stuff of it, and she just didn't get it. And so that was really crushing to me. But then I found another civilian therapist, but the reason why she works is because she was a family member of someone who served. And so she gets me. And she gets like, when we talk about stuff that's military related. So
yeah, the
just wanted to put that out there.
Cultural competence goes a long way. And I think you're absolutely right that there's probably no more acute relationship where that civil military relationship or the divide between the two cultures is more important than in that relationship with the counselor. So thank you for sharing that. Max, and then back to Maritza.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to this conversation about veterans and especially in school, as Ruthy was just talking about. I remember, so I went on 2 deployments to Iraq, and I remember coming back and going to art school because I went to animation school, and so I went to the California College of Arts in Oakland, and I remember my first class ever at CCA was a sculpture class, and one of the things that we did, the first thing we did was we put out a bunch of butcher paper on the table. It was like this group thing. We put a bunch of butcher paper out on the table, and we had these jars filled with like dyed water. It was just like water with a bunch of dye in it in different colors, and we all had to grab straws and blow bubbles into the jar, and then that would create bubbles that would seep out onto the butcher paper and create these patterns and stuff. And it was sort of this exercise in like random group art kind of thing. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, less than a year ago I was in Iraq, and here I am now blowing bubbles on the butcher paper. And it was such a weird transition. And so I think that's why, it is hard. It's very hard to be so ingrained in a culture like the Marine Corps, like other branches of the military, and then to move into the civilian world is a shock. It's a culture shock, and it's very difficult to deal with. Which is why I think, one, I just want to advocate really quick for the GI Bill. Most amazing thing that's ever happened to the military. The college gives you such a great safe space, really, to decompress, to like slowly become a civilian again. And it just gives you like a nice place to kind of like feel safe, get your voice out into your schoolwork and stuff, and just like somewhere that you can just like really be yourself in a way. So 100% please use your GI Bills, go to college. It's really good. Even if you're just figuring yourself out, go get, whatever degree, it doesn't matter. Just go do it 4 years and just decompress. You're getting paid. It's all good. But on that note, it is hard. Like, it's super, super hard to go from, the Marine Corps to being a civilian. And so I think that veterans in some ways have a tendency to, instead of doing the hard thing, which is become a civilian again, it's like close themselves off and like put on the veteran hat and like be the veteran guy and like not, I hate civilians and that kind of stuff. And so I just would want to encourage veterans to, understand that it is hard, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's okay for it to be really hard. and it's very difficult, and that's okay, but we got to get through it. We got to get to we got to reintegrate. We got to get to work, and because America has enough problems on its own, outside of the military, and we all need everybody,
That's an understatement.
So, yeah.
Right, so
Did you say
oh,
Maritza?
I thought I saw your hand up. Yep.
Oh, no, this reminds me, I was working in a cultural diversity center where we provided, legal assistance, all kinds of community related services. There was this Vietnam veteran who would come in and would get ignored by everyone. He had PTSD, I'm sure, and could not carry on a linear conversation to save his life. So any conversation took at least 45 minutes to unravel what it was that he was trying to communicate. I saw, and the civilian population treated him poorly, to say the least. I saw the same Vietnam veteran interact with my son once, and he carried on a regular, normal, ordinary conversation. He wasn't all over the place. And to me, that said a lot, that he could communicate with someone that I think he trusted or had respect for. He got no respect from the civilians that he was dealing with. And I was one of the few people who would sit and decipher his conversation, because he didn't see me as a veteran. But when he encountered my son, he had no, I watched this and I said, are you kidding me? Because I couldn't believe that he was able to communicate clearly without it taking 45 minutes to figure out.
Max?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add that it's very unfortunate the way that our country treated Vietnam veterans specifically. That is a whole other issue, but I think that's changed a lot. I think that the general nature of civilians toward veterans has changed a lot. I mean, when I went to school, and I went to a liberal arts school in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area, everybody was great. There was never, I can't think of a single instance of anybody giving me a hard time for being a veteran or for being military or anything like that. They all just were very curious about the experience, and they didn't have super strong opinions about it one way or the other. So I think that's a positive change in some way, than definitely what a lot of Vietnam veterans went through, which is remarkably terrible. So I just wanted to add that. But yeah.
Well, we're going to enter into our last question here, which I'll ask of all three of you. And Ruthy, we'll start with you. So all three of you have written pretty extensively, whether it's through journalistic outputs, and Ruthy, also through your beautiful tribute to Vanessa Gillian in The War Horse, and in other outlets, through poetry and through your comic work, Max. How do you feel that your military experience and also your cultural background play out in your writing process, or appear in what it is that you write? So Ruthy, we'll start with you.
So for me, like you said, I write news. And so when I'm writing news, I am not part of the equation. I'm just putting the words down. So writing the Vanessa Guillen reflection was really the first time that I, aside from, my little post that I put on social media, was really the first time that I was able to maybe share some of my experience. And it was really hard. I will say, I went around it, I cried, I mourned for her. And then I finally sat down and wrote it in pieces, but it ended up being very cathartic. like Maritza said, being able to just put, the words down on paper was very cathartic. For me, part of my identity, I guess, is my work that I do with Palabra by NAHJ. Proud daughter of Dominican immigrants, proud of my service in the military. Finally came around to that after, being upset with them for a really long time. And so just being able to share stories about my community, being able to share stories about, the Latino culture, and highlighting not only that we're not a monolith, and just how many amazing contributions Latinos have, are, and will continue to do in this country, and in our communities, is something that is really an amazing honor for me. So I just celebrate all my Latino brothers and sisters, our forefathers, foremothers, for everything that you guys have done. I honor you guys as we celebrate you this month.
Yeah, that's right. Maritza, how about you?
Well, I mentioned earlier that my grandmother is a prominent fixture of my poetry because I just thought she was awesome. She could do no wrong. And now that I'm a grandmother, it's like I know what role I have to fill with my grandchildren. But it took me a long time to integrate English and Spanish together on one page. And I grew up with a very strict Latino father who you had to speak Spanish at home. There was no room for English, and you never mixed the two. So it took me a few years to get over that, and incorporate Spanish into what I was writing. And now I also work as an interpreter and translator. And so now what I do is oftentimes I'll write parallel poems, one in whatever language the inspiration came, and then the other one in the other language, English or Spanish. And it is so fulfilling to be able to do that, that I can honor both of my cultures. And I'm really having fun. I'm really having fun with it. But again, I honor my ancestors with what I write. Without them, I wouldn't be here. Without their struggle, I wouldn't have the rights that I do have. And I feel more whole that I've embraced my language and that I can use it as I see fit.
That's wonderful. Max, we'll throw it to you to be the final word on the panel.
Yeah, for me, so I know people watching this are like, why are you white? I'm my mom's Jewish and my dad is Mexican. And so, I've always, in my work, I've always tried to incorporate kind of both of those sides of myself. With Terminal Lance, the two main characters, Abe and Garcia, they kind of represent like my two different like halves of me. So I'm always trying to incorporate strong Latina characters into my work. I mean, you look at The White Donkey with Abe and Garcia, you look at Battleborn with King and Chavez being the lead supporting character. So I write fiction and I write comics and stuff, but I'm always just trying to represent what I believe the military actually looks like. And we often don't see, like in popular culture, we don't see perspectives from people that are not white, So with Battleborn, the lead character was Black, and with some other work that I'm working on right now, we've got much more diverse characters. So I'm always trying to incorporate those things. I also try to incorporate my Jewish side quite a bit into my work. Just as a Jew in the Marine Corps was like a weird experience too. Just really quick, like I remember the first, I know this is Hispanic Heritage Month, not Jewish Heritage Month, but one of the first weeks of boot camp, it was Friday, right? And the drill instructor comes walking into the squad bay, and he stops everybody, and he's all like, okay, listen up. Who here is Jewish? And I remember as a Jew, I'm like, you know, usually when the military comes around asking where the Jews are, like, it's not like, it hasn't ended well for us, like, historically. So I wasn't really sure if I should say anything. But yeah, I was like, this recruit is Jewish, sir. And we, and he ended up just taking us over to the temple, and we did our Friday night service and everything, which was actually really amazing. Being a Jew in boot camp was really great. But yeah, so I always try to incorporate that stuff. I do a lot of comics about being Jewish and stuff, and you know, just try to depict the diverse Marine Corps that we have.
That's great. Maritza, you wanted one last word.
Well, all I wanted to say was that there is a very strong Jewish roots in the Hispanic community, the Spanish from the Sephardic Jews from Spain. And if you look at A Mother's War, my last name at the time was Cohen, because my second husband happened to be Jewish. So I can relate. Look at me and think of Maritza Rivera Cohen. If that didn't confuse people, nothing did.
You know, this is like really sorry, just a really sidebar off of that. But when I got out of the Marine Corps, this guy on Facebook reached out to me, whose last name was also Uriarte, and I was like, oh, this guy, you know, I don't know if he's my cousin or something, but I had zero relation to him whatsoever. But he was also a Marine veteran, and he was Jewish. And I was like, this is amazing. I've never, who would have thought, you know, and he just became a rabbi too. It's like crazy. But yeah.
It's a great way to embrace your heritage, all of your heritage. Well, we really appreciate the time that all three of you spent with us today, really sharing your work, your story, your perspective, and your heart. So we really appreciate that. We encourage everyone to keep this conversation going. We have posted all the links to each of our panelists' work in the chat. And you can follow along with their work there. We're excited to see what continues to come out of all three of you. And the next conversation that we'll have in our series will be in November, when we have a panel of Native American veteran authors speaking to us about their experience. So with that, we thank everyone in the audience for participating today, and we thank you panelists, and we hope to continue watching your work thrive and grow. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.